a very warm welcome to this edition of Insight. In Insight today we are going to talk about the state of the economy. We know that the RBI yesterday kept the key rates, interest rates unchanged, citing a lot of reasons. The depreciating rupee, the elevated food inflation, as well as the uncertainty over foreign fund inflows. But what exactly is the state of economy right now? How inconvenient is it for the various stakeholders, and which ways it really going to head? Are the measures taken by the government enough to deal with the present crisis or not? We'll talk about all of this in this edition of Insight. Joined by Dr. N.R. Bhanumurthy from National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, Ms. Shoma Banerjee from the Economic Times, and Dr. Upendra from Research and Information System for Developing Countries. Welcome to the program, all of you. Let's start the discussion with you, Dr. Bhanumurthy. It's not the first time that we are discussing this subject with you, but of course the state of affairs are certainly not very encouraging, which has in fact kept the RBI also not going a step ahead or introduce some sort of changes in the key rates. What exactly do you think is the state of affairs now, and what would you like to say about the RBI moves?
Well, RBI moves, for that matter, actually there's no surprise yesterday. Right. I mean, markets have already discounted that. You have seen after the policy, in fact the stock market has gone up, which is something unusual. In a sense, there are general expectations in the market that the central bank will not be easing its monetary policy in yesterday's round. But coming to your earlier question on the state of the economy, I think right now there's huge lack of confidence in the overall markets as well as in the real sector. So in a sense, there's no investments happening. There's no happening either in the long term or in the short term. And it's also not just because of the domestic factors. This time around, it is being coupled with a huge international factor. Actually, there's so much of confusion in the overall world financial markets. All of us are looking forward for today evening what's going to happen in FOMC. The outcome of this FOMC or some clarity from Bernanke would actually rally the market tomorrow. So we're basically expecting, huge uncertainties at the moment until unless these international financial markets settle. As the central bank already pointed out, the CAD is going to be the huge issue. In fact, we have been talking about growth inflation trade-off. Right now, growth inflation CAD trade-off. So I think we added one more trade-off into our discussion. So going forward, all these three factors will play a major role.
But this concern is certainly going to remain. We remember the time, the run up to this particular this year's budget was also marked by the speculation around CAD, fiscal deficit. Because CAD is something which we have not been talking about over ages, but now it has come to a level that you can't talk anything beyond CAD. It's that big a concern. But how is it really going to escalate now? And is the situation really going to come down at all, Shona? What is your understanding?
I really don't see any reason or any hope for the CAD to come down immediately. I mean, one big factor which has been pointed out repeatedly both by the RBI Governor Dr. Sabha and the Finance Minister is gold imports. Right. And I think the government has tried whatever it can, imposing import duty, the RBI, and they've been cautioning about gold imports. They've been talking up how it's important. They've been putting restrictions on banks. I think the banks are not allowed to issue gold coins and things like that. Right. Yeah. So there are measures which they're trying as much as possible. But they cannot just go and ban gold imports, which is one way. So I don't see that ebbing now. Why that is not ebbing, I think, is more because of lack of confidence in other instruments. So today an investor looks at his portfolio and says, where am I likely to get the best returns? And gold happens to be an area. Even internationally, if you look at the various commodities and the stock markets, people are tending to go in for such instruments. The second, and I think that is something which we cannot deny, that we cannot afford to do again anything, is oil imports. I mean, oil has been at high prices.
काफी लाइट चीज है, मैं जाती हूँ उससे टाइम पर जाने कभी कभी चाहिए अच्छा लाइट जाती नहीं है उससे टाइम पर एकदम उसको तो गवर्नमेंट का दिया
आएगा तो लोडिंग टोडिंग होगा सब तो थोड़ा चलता ही रहता है ना
A lot of bad news here.
बहुत ज़्यादा दिक्कत कंप्यूटर में रिकॉर्ड मत
लैपटॉप में कुछ जब तक दबाएगा नहीं तब तक कैसे रिकॉर्ड
ऑन है ना इसको माइनस
रिकॉर्ड कर रहे हो यार लोडिंग रिकॉर्ड कर रहे हो
the major impetus will come from investments. And investments are not picking up because these rates that were actually revised downward by RBI, I think they need to be revised further.
Okay, so there's actually a mix of a lot of factors here, because if at all we want the domestic demand to increase, we'll have to ensure that we'll have to provide more favorable situation, which probably is not happening. But the depreciating rupee, which in itself is a big problem. It touched the record low of about 50.96 to a dollar last week, and that was something which in fact led to a lot of other things domestically. How crucial is this particular phase 2 for this government, and what would you like to say about the kind of promises that were made by the finance minister afterwards, that we don't really need to make out so much out of this because we are still doing quite well, and we shouldn't be really making out too much because of the depreciating rupee.
I like to take on from where Dr. Das mentioned about how investments or investment-led growth is very important. This is exactly what the finance minister has been talking about. And they want to give this confidence to the market, to the people, to the industry that this is a passing phase, and of course we are a part of the global economy. But what worries me is that yes, financing or getting money at cheaper rates is very important for growth. But I think what is impacting sentiments of investment today is more to do with the political climate in the country and the policy climate in the country. I mean, it's one thing to get easy availability of funds, which I'm sure is a very big factor. But my interactions with the industry gives me a completely different picture. And very rarely do I hear that, it is not money that we are getting. If you see actually the banks' exposures, for instance, in the power sector, I mean, they have huge exposures, but projects are not going on stream. Projects are not going on stream, or they're stuck midway because of other reasons. Reasons like, for instance, now, the gas pricing policy, for instance, a very important policy which needs to come in place if you want projects to move. This will not only ensure investments in the power sector, but also in the exploration sector. Or say a policy decision on coal, any of these. So the big policy decisions of this government have unfortunately been stuck in too many hurdles for the last 1.5 years. I must in the same vein express that Mr. Chidambaram's coming in the finance ministry did speed in a lot of things. But despite the best of promises, despite the best of assurances, and despite, just look at what the CC, that Cabinet Committee on Investments, it came in with such a lot of promise to look into projects which are going to look at big projects which are stuck. But how many projects have they cleared in the last so many months, and where has it gone after that? I mean, despite the fact that you forced Coal India to sign fuel supply agreements, things have not moved beyond that. So yes, it is important for money or interest rates to come down to push investments. We need investments to grow, but where is the policy or the confidence that this government is being able to give? And I'm not blaming the government alone. It's the political atmosphere. It's the fact that nobody is seeing beyond the next few months. Nobody is willing to see what is lying ahead. I mean, whichever government comes to power next year will have it on its head.
Grapple with
and the rupee, just to mention a bit, and I'm sure Professor Bhanumurthy can fill in much more, is definitely impacting all of this even more, because at the time when there's the global doom and you don't have too many export markets really picking up, if your rupee starts depreciating, I think it just makes things worse.
That's right. So we'll come on that point too. Time for a very short break in Inside. Please stay tuned.
Do you take pride in being an Indian? Do you know what role you play in the making of India's democracy? Do you know who takes your voice to Parliament? Do you know it all starts with an MP elected by you? Know your MP and be a better informed Indian.
What? Know your MP. Every Friday and Saturday, 8:30 p.m.
काकी, घर में शौचालय कहाँ है? बहू को
घर में कहाँ, खुले में ही जाना पड़ेगा।
बहू, फिर तो तुम घूंघट भी खोल ही दो। एक तरफ तो आपको बहू का घूंघट भी सरकाना गवारा नहीं, और दूसरी तरफ उससे खुले में।
इस तरह तो हमने कभी सोचा ही नहीं था।
तो अब सोचो, घर में शौचालय बनवाओ और इस्तेमाल करो। जहाँ सोच वहाँ शौचालय।
श्यामू, देखो फिर आ रहा है, नया टीवी मांगेगा। मैं निकलता हूँ तो टाल दियो।
जरा रुकिए।
हाँ बोलिए।
ये देखिए कंज्यूमर कोर्ट का फैसला।
ये कागज किसी और को दिखाना, इससे कुछ नहीं होगा।
आप जरूर होगा। अदालत का आदेश न मानने पर तुम्हारे खिलाफ वारंट जारी हो सकता है।
तो क्या?
तो तुम्हें 3 वर्ष तक का कारावास या 10,000 रुपए तक का जुर्माना या दोनों हो सकते हैं। समझे?
समझ गया।
जागो ग्राहक जागो।
Welcome back to Insight, and Insight today we are talking about the state of the economy. Okay, before going into the break, we were talking about the stand that the RBI has taken, and of course the room that the government has to introduce more changes or involve or take more important measures to boost the economy. Weak currency in itself is a big problem for any nation because it has impacts on various sectors. Trade deficit being one of the important areas. Export, import, how is it going to be impacted? How crucial was the rupee depreciation at this point when other things were already, hovering around the economy? At that point of time, you face this kind of a situation. Dr. Bhanumurthy, how crucial do you think is this phase, and what are likely going to be the impacts?
No, I would take a different view on this. I'm not really worried about the level of the exchange rate.
Okay.
It is more to do with the volatility. I mean, if this volatility that we have seen for the past 1 month or 2 months, if it continues for 2 more months, then we have a big problem. But if it is stabilizing at 58, 59 or 57, that's basically the underlying factor that's contributing to this depreciation. Perhaps we'll come back to 54, 55 once the economy turns around. Okay, so it's a volatility that's a major cause for concern for the central bank and the policy makers, not the level in that sense. But coming to the other point, what is its impact on sectors? You're right. Actually, it has a significant impact on the imports, as that Das already pointed out. My slight disagreement with him is that when actually the growth is declining, I mean, you should expect declining imports as well. But what's happening right now is that the gold, non-oil imports are declining, not the oil and the gold. The reason for that is that the kind of demand which has been pushed by the higher fiscal deficit is leading to a leakage into the system. There is a demand, and the demand is happening more to the gold rather than the demand for other commodities produced within the country. So in that sense, higher fiscal deficit is actually leading to higher gold imports because there is a lot of transfers happening here. So the recent decline in the fiscal deficit is largely because of decline in the capital expenditure, not much on the current expenditure, which is actually leading to higher leakage rather than increasing your capital investment, rather than crowding in your private investment. So in a sense, the kind of fiscal consolidation that government is taking up, that 4.9% which is being cheered by everybody, I think quality of expenditure matters, actually type of expenditure matters. So you have reduced the fiscal deficit, but that happened because of your substantially reduced your capital expenditure.
So in a way, the steps that have been taken to curb the import of gold and to ensure that, to an extent that can be managed, that is a step in the right direction?
Yeah, I think the recent measures have been taken, but there's some other point, I mean, maybe I don't know, I think we have not really seen discussing in regularly, is that one of the biggest hedging that's been done by central bank governor immediately after taking up as governor was buying a gold. A huge quantity of gold has been bought, which I don't think anybody has given credit to him. The way we are intervening in the forex market, I'm not really sure whether there should be some discussion whether the central bank can intervene in the bullion market also. We have taken some measures in increasing import duties and and containing some of the banks not to allow for gold loans and all those things, that actually worked out well for us. In the last quarter of the last financial year, there is expectation that the gold imports must have come down, and there was also expectation that the CAD must have come down less than 5%. So in a sense, there are measures, but as I said that I think the fiscal deficit, the particular revenue deficit component needs to be brought down much sharper than what we have done till now.
Okay, but the fascination towards gold is something which cannot be contained, and probably that's something which the government was really targeting at, especially with respect to bringing down the CAD, which is for now at least it remains out of the government's ambit. But what would you like to say about a crucial point that Shoma also made about investment? Providing a proper investor-friendly environment is something which we have not really seen in our country. Maybe things have moved both from the public sector or from the private sector up to an extent, but not after that. And that's something which is keeping maybe a lot of investors in a fix. They are not sure whether they should be really going ahead with an investment on the domestic ground or not. Something which probably the economy would need at this point of time.
I would agree what Soma just mentioned, that we cannot hold the government responsible for investment climate. I think it is the same government or even previous governments. Investment climate, since 1991, the governments have tried to improve, day in and day out. Whenever there is a political consensus, policies have been adopted, including this year. I think with increased marketization of our economy and increased privatization of our economy, we should understand that even if the investment climate is as healthy and good as it were earlier, if the investors who are now having a larger share and activity because of the privatization mode that the government adopted since 1991, if they do not invest, then what can the government do? So we need to understand that there have been calls for increased market forces, lower activity from the government. They should withdraw from all the activities or only major activities they should undertake. So that means that the private sector say and activity has increased in the last 2 decades or so, and the investment climate has been there. It was in 1991, it was in 2000, it was in 2004, it has been improving day by day. Why is it that there is volatility in the investment behavior? Now, a lot has to be, probed from the investors' behavior rather than government behavior. So we have to bring in some balance between the regime that is actually provided by the government as a facilitation mechanism and the behavior of the investors and their response to a particular regime. And that's where I agree with Soma when she said that investors perhaps are holding on to their investment decisions because of political uncertainty, and they are waiting for the elections coming here. I don't think that is the way investors should behave. We should at some stage depoliticize profits from politics.
But just to add to that, I think the state governments also have a big role.
I just wanted to come in there. I agree completely, and I think the Prime Minister said it in his address to CII when he said the private sector has to take the lead. So it's a given now that the private sector has to play a bigger role. But let's look at the issues why the investors are not coming in, and there I kind of disagree that it cannot be. You can really separate out politics from profits. The biggest hurdle in today's investment climate, I think, is land. There is no clarity either at the state level or at the central level on how land and land rehabilitation has to happen. The centre has been trying for a land bill, which I don't know if that is going to be the solution, because ultimately land is a state subject. Yeah. So there is no land record, there is no way, the Costcos of the world and the rest. Now, you don't know what is the right way ahead, but it is a truth think that today land is a big issue in any kind of investment. Take the factor of regulators. How many sectors really have very good independent regulators who can actually go on taking decisions even if there's a political stalemate or otherwise, isn't it? That is the whole reason why we got in regulators in a liberalized economy, because so that you are not held victim or because of political crisis. Unfortunately, it's not true. Take the role played by the judiciary. Unfortunately, the cancellation of 122 licenses, let's just take that. The impact of that one judgment, just not on the telecom sector, but it is spiraled down to several sectors. So what does it leave? Where is the investor going to get the confidence from? It's not just about political formations. And let me also bring in the political factor. Unlike the previous years which Dr. Das mentioned, you are today sure that tomorrow's government will have a huge say by small regional parties who are actually becoming kingmakers.
And the probability has increased.
And the probability has increased, and their records in states are weird. I mean, if you take West Bengal, if you take any of these states, can you for any instance think of any kind of, I mean, I agree completely with Dr. Das that if you see a record of decisions which have been turned upside down, there are very far and few. Most of them will go on. But where do you get the investment, where do you get the confidence that I'll sink $2,000 or $20,000 or 20,000 crore in a project and tomorrow the tariffs will not be increased because it's a political promise that I will not give you electricity at anything more than 50 paisa. Where there are real-time examples of project developers who have sunk money, who are paying interest on their debt, but they cannot manufacture the power despite having a power plant because the state government does not believe in increasing tariff. So, I mean, can we really take away politics from profit? To my mind, I don't think it is a possibility. It is great if we could do it, but I think in reality,
no. But
we'll take a short break, Dr. Das, and maybe we'll come back on that. We'll take a short break in a side. Please stay tuned for more.
Are men from Mars?
And women from Venus?
Who is the better half?
Who takes the decisions?
Who is responsible?
Who is demanding?
Who is submissive?
Who is independent?
Can men and women ever find common ground? To find out what gender discourse. Every Thursday, 4 p.m. only on Lok Sabha Television.
संसदीय म्यूजियम के द्वारा भारतीय लोकतंत्र की विरासत का भावनात्मक अनुभव कीजिए। अधिक जानकारी के लिए संपर्क करें 011-2303-5318, 5326 4489, 5065 और 5340। आप हमें ईमेल भी कर सकते हैं museum-lss@sansad.nic.in। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.parliamentmuseum.org।
Leaders around the world are a very special person. Their policies, we have the necessary infrastructure in place. Their views in this successful story. We need to give serious attention to latest issues.
मैं तो कह रहा हूँ 33 से कम नहीं चलेगा।
Questions that matter.
Trade between Commonwealth countries and all. There is no growth as such.
Answers for the people.
Block level. आम जनता से संपर्क करके
small parties are coming up. Broadening the conversation.
We don't have to destroy it to the constitutional apparatus.
In talks with Rajiv Mishra every Saturday 8 p.m. in special guest only on Lok Sabha television.
Welcome back to Inside. And Inside today we're talking about the state of the economy. The RBI has very categorically told the government to create conducive environment to attract more investment, to boost growth. But where is the conducive environment? We're talking about how to boost the infrastructure, the investment in various sectors. And certainly, as Shoma had said in the last segment too, that we can't keep these two things aside. Economics and politics certainly go hand in hand, at least in our country. Dr. Das was saying something else, right?
See, there are two broad points I want to make, and then I think we should have some time for some of the structural, factors that we need to keep in mind. One is that, see, in economics, any economy, goes from one equilibrium to another equilibrium through a series of disequilibria. And if this does not happen in an economy, then there is something wrong. Because you may be stuck at a low level of equilibrium, or maybe you are stuck at a high level of equilibrium. So a developing country like India, given the magnitude and the way we have traveled the road, since our economic reform started, this size and the speed at which that we have been moving, I mean, it is but natural that there will be disequilibria, especially when the internationalization of our economy has increased tremendously in recent years. Therefore, if US Fed, gives a signal that they are not going to buy treasury bonds and they become more attractive, that drives up the dollars, and therefore FIIs will take away, dollars, and that will, create pressures on rupee, and rupee will depreciate. Obviously, RBI will be concerned with the, impact on inflation about that. But at the same, and therefore they will not reduce the, repo and, CRR or back rates at the rate of interest. Second is that how do you tackle current account deficit? One way is that you increase your exports. Another is to curtail your imports. I already made this point that with some lag perhaps, the initiatives taken to curtail gold imports by increasing tariffs on them, by banning exports of gold from SEZs, by banning imports of gold from Thailand, which was being misused by our own Indian private sector, these efforts would, after a lag, will show up in terms of improving the current account deficit, given the fact that a large portion is accounted for by gold imports. Now, secondly, how do we increase our exports? And that is something which we often miss out. Exports are now not dependent on US and European markets, and Indian private sector is not understanding that India has tried through a free trade agreement strategy, FTA strategy, to diversify its export markets. The economic gravity has shifted to Asia, and we have engaged with Asia to provide greater exporting space, greater sources of alternative import supplies, greater investment space, greater scope for trading services, technology, human resources, and so on. But let me flag this, that it is the problem of the Indian private sector that in all these agreements, Indian private sector has not tried to harness these emerging markets in Asia through the FTAs that have been signed. If they do so, they can easily, augment their exports, they can easily increase their investments in other countries, and the rate of return, is very high in those countries. This is something which is largely overlooked by Indian private sector. So my basic point is that yes, there is politics, yes, there is economics, but I am very sure that entrepreneurs also do not give much emphasis to politics when it comes to their survival and reaching higher profits. That also is a reality. They will dump anyone if it ensures higher profits.
Dr. Bhanumati, your views?
If you see the recent report by Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, they do highlight two important points, which I also estimated one of them. One is that rising incremental capital output ratio. All the things that Shoma has already pointed out actually can be reflected in the increasing incremental capital output ratio, which was actually, I estimated it was less than 3 before the crisis. Now it is almost close to 5. What it means is that you are getting just 1% out of 5% capital. Then who will invest in that kind of situation? The other point that ESC pointed out, which actually what Dr. Das was highlighting, already I am told that I think the recent trend is that there is a huge trade diversification happening in the kind of destination that you are talking about. I think the past 6 months there is evidence that shows that the trade is happening not just in Europe or US. Just to say that private sector is also looking for avenues. So these two issues are
what has happened is that our trade deficit in Asia is very huge.
Yes.
So what has happened is that FTA has been signed. The other partners have taken advantage of India. Our own entrepreneurs have not taken advantage of tariff market access. That is my point. There's a big player that they need to take advantage. And these are the dynamic economies. I mean, Europe is sliding. US is slightly better now, but this is the growth center, and this is where our entire effort should be.
But the moment you say increase, ensure that you have more investment domestically, you have to make investor-friendly environment. I would like you to, Dr. Bhanumati, also comment on things that Shoma had earlier indicated, whether it's to do with the land bill, or it's to do with the mining bill, or it's to do with the, we'll come to the food bill a little later, but these pending legislations, what kind of impact do they really have? And of course the need of the regulator too, which is something we recently have got, there is a bill regarding the regulation of the real estate sector that has just gotten on. But what would you like to say about these aspects?
See, I've been talking about this word. It's not policy paralysis, it's the policy reversals.
Yes.
And policy uncertainty, which is actually holding up your investments. Everybody is sitting on huge cash, particularly the public sector enterprises. Even after Prime Minister's warned Finance Minister warned them that you have to either declare higher dividends or you give it back to the government. So nothing is happening, and they are investing abroad. So there are lots of structural issues. The other surprising thing is that we have been talking about the coal sector for quite some time. We got the regulator just 2 weeks back. And these are the policies.
Options have been not held because you don't have a regulator.
Yeah.
So the scramble account,
yes.
The question of a regulator and options came up for 1 year now. January 1, I think,
yes.
It was the Prime Minister's directive, which is unheard of. A Prime Minister's directive to a public sector company that you have to sign FSS.
Yes.
Despite that, it took some 6 months.
So all those uncertainties are there, and all these things are reflecting your increasing ICON. And that's exactly what the central bank is talking about. We can do our duty, but you also have to do, not just the finance ministry, I think the line ministries also need to be blamed.
But higher ICOR will also reflect, inefficient use of capital within enterprises.
Yeah. So they don't want to pour money when they have a
And what about the food inflation? One of the things which the RBI also mentioned about yesterday.
I am always very puzzled with this food inflation. One, because we've had good monsoons. I think I don't know how many years together now, which by itself I think is a huge gift of nature. Because India was known to have 3 years or 5 years, whatever. The economists have a data time to cycle for this. We've not, unfortunately for us, rain gods or rain has smiled on. So that means what is really the problem? That means the production is happening. Food grain, we know that we are already abundant. Vegetable and also. So it is basically coming down to the same thing, supply constraint. I have been hearing this supply constraint for the last 5 years from every quarter. So what is it that we can do to address this supply constraint? I'm sure the answer is not just multi-brand retailing. It is to do with improving infrastructure, supply systems, our food corporation, whatever you want to say. Why that is not happening? I'm sure my panelists would give me better answers than me. But
no, you already mentioned. You see, it has not been happening. Let us give a try to multi-brand retail. I mean,
that again is stuck in politics. European governments will not allow APMC to be changed.
You see, it is not matter of state governments not allowing. That is a flexibility given to state governments.
Dr. Das, what would you like to say about the structural deficiencies of the system which we have failed to address?
That is what, I mean, she already mentioned. See, the infrastructure, the bridging of supply and demand. In between there are traders who, many times, the product is there, they will hold it. He talked about cash holding. There have been goods holding. And that artificially, jacks up prices. Now, why do we have so many midpoints? I mean, right from farmers to consumers. Using e-system, we have been saying this many times. Why can't we connect farmers to the end user?
I came across a farming community, sir, in Bengal. They are not really farmers. They have land. Just like you have some excess land. It takes she told this lady who owns the land told me, it takes 2 rupees for her per kg to get a person to pick up bindi, lady's finger, from her field, which is grown in abundance. She gets 1 rupee per kg in selling it. She's less than raw. It's easy for people to come. She says, I don't get even the cost that I put in farming it.
That is what
this is the reality and true story everywhere.
So I think there are some places, not everywhere. I think there are some places, Andhra, Tamil Nadu. The price discovery happens in a very different way compared to other parts of the country. There is information flow to the villages is very, very fast and strong and sharp and very accurate. That gives more information for the farmers where they need to go. But I think the inflation is not completely because of the supply side. There is also a demand side component. I think Subodh Dogra's famous lecture where it actually said that the quality of consumption has increased because the transfers are happening in a much bigger way as part of our inclusive growth and inclusive development activity at the rural level.
So basically the food plate has changed. I mean, Dr. Gulati also has said this. If you look at the nutrition or the food plate of a consumer, that has changed because it has moved from basic to maybe a little higher protein, milk or whatever. So a dal, for instance, the kind of dals that are which is leading to demand of certain things which probably are not used up
what
to
we
their
should do is that just the way we try to calculate our inflation index in terms of composition of commodities, we should have indices according to states. And we should see that the same product, why is it that in one state, the inflation is at a different level, and that is where interstate comparisons, in terms of information flow and portability of products from one place to another, in a seamless manner, will highlight this.
The underlying thing is that at the state level we don't have GDP at factor cost.
Okay, we'll take a very short break on that note. Please stay tuned for more on the other side.
Leaders around the world are with a very special person. Their policies, we have the necessary infrastructure in place. Their views in this successful service. We need to give immediate attention to latest issues. Questions that matter. Between Commonwealth countries and all. There is no growth as such. Answers for the people.
Lot related. Aam Janata se sampark karke. Small parties are made up.
Broadening the conversation.
We don't have to destroy to the constitutional apparatus.
In talks with Rajiv Mishra every Saturday 8 p.m. in Special Guest only on Lok Sabha Television. decisions?
Who is responsible?
Who is demanding?
Who is submissive?
Who is independent?
Can men and women ever find common ground? To find out, watch Gender Discourse. Every Thursday, 4 p.m. only on Lok Sabha Television.
Welcome back to Inside and Inside. Today we are talking about the state of the economy. Right, and recently the global rating agency Fitch has upgraded India's outlook from negative to stable with BBB minus rating. Maybe you can explain it a bit, Dr. Das. How is this rating? Because we know that the moment India's outlook is being rated by certain rating agency, there are ripples down here in the country too. But how does it really impact the overall economy?
See, first of all, we should understand that these rating agencies, include both economic and non-economic factors when they upgrade or downgrade a particular country. And the purpose is for an international audience, how should you look at a particular country in terms of political stability, economic viability of your project, investments, and so on. Right. Now, at one point of time, you will have different ratings by different international raters. Now, how is that possible? That is possible only when you achieve a particular point and give a particular rating to a particular country's overall impression using some discretionary impression. It is very subjective. Otherwise, if it is so methodical and so scientific, all the rating agencies should be giving equal ratings at a given point of time. Yes. Now, the very fact that it does not happen, that means there is some element of arbitrariness in rating of economies. And that is why, there has been voice that there should be a rating agency of the rating agencies.
Okay.
How good a rating agency is and how equipped they are.
To decide as to which one should be taken up seriously.
Exactly. Now, in terms of the implication that you asked, once they, rate, what happens is it creates expectations. So it creates expectations about an economy, both in terms of investments, trade, technology exchanges, skill flows, and so on. So the overall business climate, is, actually viewed with expectations. Now, if they downgrade, the expectations go down. If they upgrade, the expectations improve. Now, it is a human psychology, and that is where, it is not only economics and politics, it is psychology of economics as well. That when you start painting something negative about an economy, there will be negative sentiment, all around. If you start painting positive sentiment about an economy, there will be positive sentiment. That is why you would have realized that many people, even RBI, was very cautious when it was actually trying to, give the release for yesterday's meeting. And therefore, my understanding of the rating agencies is that it is a combination of economics, non-economic factors that include politics and psychology. So ultimately, it is the psychology which determines market sentiments, and sentiments are sentiments.
Okay.
Actually, in terms of implication, many of the international fund managers, they have to follow these ratings very strictly.
Yes.
Okay, until unless you say that, it's an investment grade or positive grade, you cannot get the money to this country. So that has a very serious
on the ground, that is what is important, because it impacts your grades as far as instruments are concerned, funding is concerned, financial decisions are concerned. But I agree with Professor Das or Dr. Das completely. The joke is that every time the finance minister speaks, he actually has a separate audience watching, which is the rating agencies. So how much he does on subsidy pruning, how much he does on growth, and surely a apart from markets which they target, look at what the finance minister's press conferences last week.
Yes.
What did it say? What is the bottom line of what he said? He said we are going through a rough phase, but it's a passing phase. Please be ready. We are coming out with unleashing huge set of reforms. So what is that? That is building expectations. That is trying to tell the audience, including the international audience like rating agencies, that we are on the path. Don't go by what is happening politically or on the ground. We are ready to move ahead. We are ready to move with executive decisions. The whole drama, if you remember very well, we had a discussion on the food ordinance, was just because of this. What did it try to show? It showed that the government is resolved in what it wants to do. It will go ahead with the decision. If the legislature or the parliament does not give you the support, we are ready to do. So this is also to do with meeting that, it's about, I think, image management.
And government in fact, recently said that they've come up with a 5-point plan for bringing normalcy in the market. The points that we started with, which includes coal pricing, coal allocation to power plants, gas pricing, revision of foreign direct investment limits, skill development, Savings Committee on new norms for.
So now tell me what is new in this. Mr. Chidambaram, and I have greatest respect for the man. 5-point agenda. Coal pricing, age-old problem. Gas pricing, age-old problem. FDI inflows and subjectivity and whatever they are going to do, 49% FII as well as FDI. We will allow minimum 49% in defense and everything else. What is it? There is no magic wand that Mr. Chidambaram has. He alone can do nothing. And I agree, it's ultimately the line ministry, but it's ultimately the state governments. You do not have them on board. Despite committees and the Prime Minister's office breathing down the neck, the coal minister and the power minister and the petroleum minister are not on the same page when it comes to gas pricing. None of them are. Despite a Rangarajan committee report, you now have a Kelkar committee. So there is no end to committees, simply because I think people are not able to think in one direction, or they are rather too short-sighted in the way they are looking at it.
That is the point.
It is just that you are looking at your set of people, you are not looking at these. For instance, the power minister looks at power rates will go up. So you are that is because you have decontrolled fuel prices, you have controlled power prices. The output industry is controlled, the input industry is decontrolled. How can you have them on the same page? You just cannot. You have created conditions which you can't have.
Okay. Let's now talk about the road ahead for this government. What is it that can be done, especially at this point? I can see the smile on your face. What is it that can be done? Can some long-term measures be thought out? Can the government really work on that? Or maybe would the government really like to stick to the 2014 plan and have something done before the next Lok Sabha election? What is it that's probably, Shoma, you can start.
I have a very clear idea of what I think as a citizen and as a person who's involved with what the government is doing in a large extent is, don't set up any more committees. Don't announce any more big policy things which you're going to do. Just get your fix on what you've announced. Just get working on what has already been announced. There is no point in giving us hope on, and this reform, for me, I'm telling you, I was asking this yesterday in our news meeting. What is reform anymore? I mean, any decision is not a reform. So basically, getting your act together on whatever you have announced and get that going would be a great confidence booster, rather than giving us big rosy pictures on big policies, on big committees, on big associations.
So they announced, when we follow the announced, they had announced DTC, GST, work on GST,
get that happening,
then food security, and then
they have on their plate. They can easily go ahead and do
In
it.
the sense, no policy reversals.
Exactly.
No policy reversals. Dr. Bhanumurthy,
policy reform.
do you really see that happening?
Well, I think,
that the government has an influence?
see, the underlying issue is that we are part of the global system. I think there is so much of disturbance happening, not just in India and abroad also, in the short term. So in the medium term, I think government can do many things. As the 5-point program, at least I should look forward for this 5-point policy, I think by the end of August. That gives some kind of boost to the markets. And also the fiscal deficit is one of the reasons why the Fitch has actually upgraded. And one needs to really look at this fiscal deficit, the decline in fiscal deficit. But if you're reducing capital expenditure, then you don't need to get into fiscal consolidation. if that is the ultimate sector which is going to be affected, you don't get into fiscal consolidation at the moment. You relax the fiscal consolidation to some extent. So at the same time, I think RBI is holding the space, which is a good news for us. It is holding the space for future monetary policy intervention. On the other hand, fiscal side, you don't have any space for. If something untoward happens in the global markets, it further deteriorates in the short term, in the financial market. On the fiscal side, you don't have any kind of space. I think that way, RBI is holding some space, which is a good news for us.
Dr. Das, final comments from you.
I think consolidation. This is the phase of consolidation. I totally agree with Soma when she says that don't announce anything new. You consolidate what you have announced until now. That is one. Coordination across line ministries and coordination vis-a-vis states. Because this has been a major problem. Again, Suma highlighted that everybody is looking at at one's own picture, and the overall vision is very myopic. And third is consultation. Consultation with the private sector. Because if we have consolidation, coordination, and consultation with private sector, I think this next.
So you have three C's, but a different C. I think that's very interesting. Okay, so on that note, it's time to thank you all. Quite a pleasure having you all here, and thanks very much for coming and telling us as to what all can be done. We certainly have to wait to see as to whether these things are really done on the ground or not. Thanks very much. So that's all we have for you in this edition of Insight. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.